Hi there, I'm Dr. Kim Ernest, and this is the How to Be Happy Hour. Today, we are going to be talking about the inner relationship between physical health and mental wellness.
Hi, I'm Mitch Davis. 15 years as a personal trainer and strength coach, and currently a doctoral candidate at Liberty University.
Hi, my name is Rachel Nye Salmon. I'm a certified yoga therapist.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Helt. I'm a certified yoga instructor and owner of Wild and Free Power Yoga Studio in Elizabethtown.
I'm Deb Thomas. I'm a licensed professional counselor here at Pennsylvania Counseling Services, and I'm a Fit to Fight Krav Maga instructor.
Fit to fight. What does that mean? Because I think most people know yoga. We know what strength coaching is. You're also a runner, Mitch?
Yeah.
You train for marathons and whatnot?
Sort of.
Ish.
Okay. Yeah.
But what is Krav Maga? Because that is something that I imagine many of our listeners might not be familiar with.
Well, in a teeny tiny nutshell, it's a functional and dynamic self-defense strategy. So it is self-defense, but it's real life type training. I train at Rise Training. I've been with them for 9 years. I blame my instructor for a lot of my inability to do any of my other hobbies or spend time with my family, because it's, as we'll talk about, it's pretty life transforming. But it's basically a way for any person at any fitness level, big, large man, small, tiny woman, effective techniques to protect yourself, to sort of counterattack in a brutal way and get out safely. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the reasons why this particular topic appealed to me is that while I know that physical movement is one of the single best things that we can do to protect our mental health or recover from mental illness, I don't practice what I preach near as often as I should. So I'm really great at like walking my dog a few times a week or doing my chicken chores. But so often, like, I'll be signed up to go to Lindsay's studio and then I don't make it through the door. I think I did that last weekend. So how do we sort of create space for this and prioritize it? How do we put it in the forefront of our values to make sure that people like me are able to kind of practice what they preach and lean into it when it's not something that's like a career, which it is for many of you? So how do we do that? How do you balance that with everything else?
That's a great question. I think we're all creatures of habit, and we definitely do get stuck in those behavioral patterns and ruts. And oftentimes it's, I think it's like having manageable goals and expectations set. I mean, sometimes even like getting out the door to go to a yoga class can be really, really challenging because, we have life and, things happening. And so I think giving yourself, a short walk or maybe, something that you can do even at home sometimes helps. But we do get in those patterns and ruts. And I think it's easy to, kind of do to back away from the things that we know that help sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think the showing up is the hardest part. I think that the instinct is really to kind of list all of the reasons why we shouldn't, right? Like, I'm tired, it's raining, it's colder, the weather isn't perfect, the situation isn't ideal. But I found that something that works for me is to have a go-to list of reasons I should, right? And as soon as I come home from a practice or come home from that physical exertion and feeling how I feel inside, where like my energy is just pulsating through my body and that, everything feels optimistic and lighter and there's sunshine even though it's raining. And I write down how I feel in those moments. And then moments where I feel like I just don't want to do this, I go to that list and say, yeah, but I can feel like this if I just do it. If I just get out the door, if I just show up, this is what comes from it. And kind of convincing ourselves why to do something instead of why not to, which is the instinct.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not doing it, it's just not fun. Adults have convinced ourselves that having fun is pointless or stupid, but I train clients from ultramarathoners to CrossFitters, and oftentimes we think it's the sport or the avenue that kind of picks us, but we have to pick whatever is interesting to us. So if I try running and I find myself not running, chances are it's because I don't like running, and that doesn't mean that another avenue isn't going to help me be physically fit and therefore mentally fit as well.
Yeah, if you had asked me, 9, 10 years ago, can you carve out an extra 10 hours a week? I would say like, hell no. I have 2 little kids. I have a full-time job. I'm on call 24 hours a day. No, absolutely not. And I watched for a while, like as a spectator, some higher level like self-defense Krav Maga classes, and I was like, oh, it just looks so badass. I want to try it, and I had to like, come on, and I signed up for like a Mother's Day, take six classes, and I got hooked. It was so different from what I did in my job, or at least I thought it was different. It's actually really similar. So it was so different, and I could just show up, and people would say, "Oh, you just got to find the thing you love." I was like, I work out, I exercise, I hike, whatever. I don't love any of it. I don't. Like, I'm in my head, and I'm just, wherever I go, I'm like carrying all my mental shit with me. But when I do this, you can't think at all. I really can't think about anything except what's happening in that moment, or like I'm gonna get punched in the teeth, or I'm gonna get like taken to the ground. Like, I'm not thinking. Like, I'm doing I'm training my body to do something that I can't be preoccupied with my thoughts, and that's what hooked me. And I did. I carved out a whole lot of time I never thought I had.
You mentioned doing it while on call. And how do you find, because I think that that's something that in my supervisions, in my consultations, one, I mean, I think I'm in the phase of life right now that you described being in when you started this journey. And that so often I've got little kids, and so I can't do it. Or I've got so much work to do, so I can't do it. Or I'm on call and I can't be unavailable. And so how do you square that circle? How did you find time to mom and full-time job and full-time therapize and still do it?
It meant a lot to me to have an instructor that had like times all the time.
Okay.
So, and unbeknownst to me now in hindsight, I look at it, I took my kids, got them in classes. It encroached on my son's, gaming time, so he wasn't really into it. But my daughter at 12 started training, and she's 18 now.
a beast now.
So it had these bigger impacts. I mean, I had a community of other people, all very, very different from one another. That really helped me to know that I could just show up with all the baggage that I had. The being on call part, if it's an emergency, call me a couple times. I'll hear my phone. I'll go. I could step away. I had permission to now get back on the mat and let's go. So, and then it was amazing to me how, because I was so passionate about it, I made it work. I made it work. Like, I was like, can you step in here, do this? I need to go train. And of course I had permission. I had to work on giving myself permission. I have a crisis. I can't go train right now, but I know I can go tomorrow. So that's how I did it. I still do it every day. It's still kind of figuring out, can I make it today?
How do the rest of you find that balance? Because I know each of you are parents in addition to all your other roles. So how do you, and do you have 5 children?
I have a blended family of 5, yes.
Okay, and I know you're over there with 3.
Wow.
You're just the
Can be
amateur
done.
here with one beautiful little boy. So how do you find the time? Because that is the story I tell myself very frequently. Like, I can get out for hikes, or I can do those things because I can take my kids with me. And truthfully, I love hiking. I love being outside. So when it comes to physical movement, if I can be outside and it's nice out, I'm here for it every time. But how do you balance the needs of the other, especially in that caretaking role, and your own needs for this sort of self-care?
I think it's recognizing the importance of having the self-care in order to be a good caregiver and to do, your job well. But definitely, the nice part about yoga is yoga-based practices are portable. So, I can do a forward fold in the kitchen when the kids are stressing me out to downregulate my nervous system. I can kind of bring and weave those things in. But for me, that's something that's always been really important, is like, how can I weave these things into my day-to-day? Because there isn't always time, for an hour-long practice for me in my world with everything that I have going on. So can I be creative and meditate in the car, or, move in between client sessions, so having, that adaptability of things, I think for me is really important, because I can't always set aside a huge chunk of time, unfortunately, right now. Maybe that'll change, but yeah.
I think for me, I make time very consciously. No one is going to hold you down and force you to take care of yourself. So it's something that I strongly feel like you have to do for yourself. I will miss basketball games. I will say I'm going to yoga on Thursday night, and if things come up, I will depend on my village. And I feel, I wrestle with that mom guilt, but I also know that I cannot show up as my best self for my kids if I don't also take care of myself. And I also want to teach them to take care of themselves as they kind of move through the world. So by showing them I am important too, and I need this for my mental health, and I need this to be a better mom for you. So I am okay tapping out every once in a while and letting dad handle it, or calling grandma, or tossing them in with the neighbors, and wrestling with myself to be okay with that, but knowing that at the end of the day, everybody is better because of it. But you have to do it for yourself, because it's easy to just kind of give everybody else your time except for yourself.
I didn't originally think I was doing it for myself. I just loved it. Like, I was doing it for the thing. Then after a while, I learned, like, yeah, this is really, really good for me. In like, I could probably list like 500 ways. But I was doing it because, like, I loved the thing.
That passion had you hooked.
Like,
Yeah, you were
I learned that I wasn't alone in, wow, like this part of you that wants to fiercely fight to defend your life. There's a place for that. Like, there's a place to learn how to harness that and what to do with that. And then that creates this cycle of, like, I physically feel fit, and I mentally am much, much better able to show up in very intense situations, and like, it's going to be okay. But it was doing it that I loved. And people would talk about that, like, I love running, or I love it, and like, I love it, and I can't miss it. I have to do it. And I was like, yeah, I don't have anything like that really. And then I did.
And then you find it.
Yeah.
That's great.
I might be the oddball out here. First and foremost, as a personal trainer, like, I am probably the most privileged person on earth in terms of scheduling. I can work out at noon when no one's at the gym. So, like, personal trainers will say, oh, we're up at 4 a.m. and we're only getting home late. Yeah, but we have 5, 6, 7 hours in the middle of the day to do what we want. So I think for me, I've just sort of separated, like, I don't need fitness in my life. Now I'm also 16 years addicted to drugs and alcohol, and now I'm 3 years sober. And so my whole life was about perfectionism and doing everything that I needed to do and masking who I truly was. And so my really good friend Carl kind of helped me through a really rough part in my life. Yes, I call him Gandalf. Kind of looks like him too.
Resemblance, I was going to say. Resemblance.
But fortunately for me is right when I decided to get sober, I also had to have back surgery right on my spine from an issue in the Marine Corps. And Carl said, what are you going to do if you can no longer fitness? And that was a big wake-up call for me that my God was fitness, and everything I did in life revolved around fitness. It didn't matter if I was drunk or high, I could still make it into the weight room, and I could still attack it extremely hard. And so for me, I'm now more fit and more healthy now that I don't really give a shit about my fitness, and I give a ton of a shit about my wife and my son, and he's my world. And I think for a lot of us, being able to understand that there's that guilt, and again, I'm privileged, I can work out anytime I want, but if Wyatt wants to hang out, I'm picking Wyatt every single time, because for 16 years, I picked myself every single time, so.
How do you, so one of the things that you described, and I think Deb, you alluded to it as well, is like the social community and those connections that you have within, and your reference to Carl, like how Carl sort of led you through some hard times, and some difficult connections. And so I realize that group exercise or team sports or that sort of thing has that social connection baked into the process. But how do you all envision the gains that we see from that overlap of physical movement and mental toughness or mental wellness or whatever it is? How do you all see the social component playing into those pieces in each of your individual spheres?
The social component is what makes it for 99% of the people. I work out alone in my garage, but as a CrossFit coach and as a high school strength and conditioning coach, people come in through the doors because there's other people with them. And, you know, you turn on social media, people have it in their bio, like, here's my CrossFit gang. Like, people really make their personality a part of whatever their community is. I forget the study name, but they compared group walking to just psychotherapy, and group walking showed a whole lot more benefits in terms of depression. And everyone says, oh my gosh, exercise is king. Well, what we forgot to look at was that it was group exercise. Mm-hmm. And so I think it is extremely hard if you are someone on your own, unless you're really self-motivated. It becomes a whole heck of a lot easier when you go to a CrossFit gym or you go to a yoga studio or whatever it is, and you have that community with you.
Absolutely. I think the social component is incredibly important. We're social beings. We're built for social engagement and social connection. And so having that is really important, a place where you feel at home. And as a yoga therapist, I use, predominantly one-on-one sessions, but even there in that context, that therapeutic relationship, people want to be seen and heard and understood and really feel that deeply. And so I think that's, in addition to the yoga poses and, practices, it's that feeling of connection and being seen that I think is really transformative and healing for people.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I know for our studio, building community is really our number one priority, because it's the community that keeps people coming and excited to be there. And I think that there's this idea that we are in this life alone sometimes. Like, no one could ever be going through the thing that I am going through right now that is making me cry myself to sleep, or no one has any idea what it's like to feel this overwhelmed as a mom. And then you come together with a group of like-minded people, and it's, oh, me too, and you make these connections and you feel held and supported and like, hey, this is, these are some ideas of how I get through it, or, hey, I'm here for you if you need to talk, and now I'm not alone anymore. And I think that just having that support and that network and people to lift you up when you're feeling low is reason, to show up. The yoga's the extra, right? Like the really fun, high energy practice, that's what comes after you make the connections with people and connect and build and form those really important relationships. And it just as the accountability too, like, you're much more committed to going somewhere if you have someone going with you and saying, hey, are we meeting there at this time? And then you have less of a, I think, tendency to back out or cancel
like
class.
An accountability.
Because you're going with somebody.
Yeah.
And
I think what really made it click so well for me was as a pretty introverted person, I live an extroverted life, and it's exhausting. And I was like, I take care of my kids, and I take care of everything at home, and I take care of a lot of people at work, and responsible for the clinical outcomes of the families we work with, and they're all in crisis. And it's like it's so much that when I first started training, there was like one or two other women. And now I train at a place where it's 70% women. And to me, that was a sign of a healthy place, because women that feel safe to train with men that, are all like super respectful and just like, we all have like vulnerable parts on our body, just like the next person. And so that's what we're talking about. So it's, bigger, stronger may matter, but we're all there training to like defend our lives or protect ourselves, or, so the community part, like, kind of built over time. And there's a lot of us, we all kind of do different things. Like, I wasn't there to have to take care of anybody else. That really was appealing to me. And I didn't know that until I really kept going, that this is one place where I'm not in my head, as I said, and I can just train and learn these techniques. And we laugh a lot because, I mean, it's messy. It's messy. You give your kid a black eye in a drill and you're like, oh shit, don't tell your school counselor about that. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to school and telling everybody. My mom gave me a black eye, but don't tell him I punched you. Like, please. And she's like, oh, this is going to be, I mean, there's a lot of crazy conversations that come out of, like wardrobe failures when you're like grappling on the ground. And I think a lot of the women there, we bond over that. The guys are like, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, it's all right. Like, don't worry, payback's coming. So, yeah. But the community part evolved for me from a place of not necessarily seeking that out at first.
Mm-hmm. So, Deb, what you just said really, because I am a fairly introverted person in an extremely extroverted role. So I, for probably 30 to 40 hours a week on average, talk to people for a living. And then I have kids that just want to talk all the time, like just all the words and not necessarily areas in which I'm an expert. Like, so what type, like we have to talk about different types of Pokemon or whatever it is. Right. And there are moments where it's like, gosh, I just don't want words, or I don't want, and so I struggle with that. I think also in the accountability piece fits for me and tracks for me. And I think when once upon a time, because I married an introvert too, so I can come home, and before we had kids, Mike and I could really respect and honor one another. When I was like, hey, I need a no words night, and he's like, yeah. Fuck yeah, let's do a no words night.
I don't want to hear you.
Like that's like music to my husband's ears. Wait, we can be in different rooms and not speak to one another, and that's how we love each other in this moment. Perfect.
Amen.
But now I don't have that as much anymore, and so I think that's why I get lost in the woods so much, because it's like, man, like no words night there though. I can go out with the dog, and the dog's not going to want to talk to me. But even like group social classes, as much as I love the moments on the mat in yoga where we're there as the collective, but there's not that social burden of engagement and interaction, I know that for me, there are moments where the deterrent is the before and after. It's the hellos and the goodbyes that it's like, golly, I just don't, I don't have any of that left in the tank today. And so what my tank needs is a no words moment. And so that's when I feel like myself retreating into the woods and finding silence or still, not even just silence, stillness and quiet. And usually it's over like the 90s hip hop that I listen to while I run, but it's still, to me, it's quiet and it's that calm at the eye of the storm. But I don't know.
You can show up grumpy to fighting anytime. Yeah. You can just show up grumpy, messy, ragey, whatever. Yeah. And and if you don't feel those things, that's fine too.
So there's a couple different benefits of exercise, and I'll tap into some of these now, or just review my list a little bit, and then see what sparks for y'all. But we've got, obviously, stress reduction is one of the big ones. So we know that physical movement can be a stress reliever. It reduces levels of that stress hormone cortisol that everyone's either chasing or trying to avoid, but we rarely have a super positive relationship with cortisol. It's either we want more of it or less of it, but rarely do we find ourselves in balance with it. We also know that exercise can improve cognitive function, sleep improvement, self-esteem and confidence. What else do I have down here? Routine and structure distract from cravings, and just overall contribute to a sense of well-being. When it comes to routine and structure, I think what I find in my world where I don't have a lot of routine and structure, like I've got kids whose needs are variable each time. My workplace needs are vastly variable given my role. My husband's needs, my familial needs, it is really hard for me to find routine and structure. And I believe success in physical movement relies on routine and structure. And I think even when we start out, you mentioned habit, like you build it in and make it a part of the habit. So how do people who haven't yet found that routine and structure fit, knowing that each week to week, my life is very, very different and the demands on my time is different. How do we find a flexible but consistent way to fulfill that need? Or how have y'all found that balance?
I think, well, first off, looking at it from an evidence-based perspective, we don't know what the hell we're talking about. We want to think we know what we're talking about, but we don't know what we're talking about. And so I think a lot of times people get buried by this information on the internet or wherever it is that's just wrong. And a lot of reasons why it's wrong is because we're dealing with humans. And so what happens is, we're trying to find this balance of cortisol, not too much, not too little, and then we turn on a podcast or Instagram or whatever. And now it's just a laundry list of more, right? And so not only do I have to fitness, I also have to take an ice bath, and I also have to sauna, and I also have to intermittent fast, and I can't have my coffee for the first 2 hours in the morning. None of that actually stacks up to any type of legitimate study, but you have people who think it does. And now I'm not spending an hour with fitness. I'm spending my entire waking life thinking about fitness and health. I've been training my dad. Inversely, if anyone knows John Davis, the most relaxed man on earth. John is 72, 73. He is more healthy from looking under the hood, so going to his doctor. He's more healthy now. He moves better now than he ever has in his entire life. And my dad is the least consistent client I have. Least consistent client I have, but he's the happiest person I've ever met. And he spends many hours with his favorite person on earth, his grandson. And so we have to stop looking at it in terms of do more, and we have to start looking at it in terms of just being happy and being okay with I'm doing what I'm doing. John is supposed to train with me twice a week. He missed Monday, and now I'm here, so he's missing today. John isn't beating himself up over that, and he knows starting next week he'll get back into it. And if something comes up, something comes up. Now, we know John, he's a bit like of a huge outlier in terms of life is just life and I'm going to relax. But looking at my father as a role model, it's like, holy smokes, I spent way too much time and effort thinking of all the extra crap I needed to do when really it's just small steps over the long period. And long period means years and years. We want immediate results, but in my realm, when I'm talking to a client and I'm onboarding them, I say, what's your short-term goal? And then they start talking, and I say, short-term means a year from today. Anything under that is not short-term. Short-term starts at a year, and then we'll look at 5 years. And so I think we just want right now, and that kind of.
If I went to the gym and I came home like feeling better in the moment, and oftentimes I do, but not always.
Yeah.
But if I worked out like once and my pants fit better, like I would do it all the time. If there could be more and it's that instant gratification world that I think we live in. And I was just talking to my husband about that yesterday, about some of our fears for our kids, because even like they don't have little moments of distress tolerance anymore. Like like not getting to watch what you want on TV. Like growing up, if our favorite show wasn't on, we didn't get to watch our favorite show.
Right.
Now everything is on demand.
Right.
Like I was driving my kids home yesterday, and my youngest wanted to listen to a very specific song in that exact moment. I'm like, well, buddy, I'm driving, so I'm not going to look at my phone while I'm driving. And if it comes on, you can hear it. But otherwise, like, we're going to listen to whatever comes on next. And it's those little moments of distress tolerance that I don't know that this next generation coming up will have access to. And I already noticed how hard I struggle with immediate gratification. And so what does this mean looking forward for like our parenting, our leadership, our culture, when immediacy isn't something we're going to have when it matters, when it counts?
Just to make everyone go on.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Just to make us all feel better, I've been a high school coach since I was 15 years. Every single year, we are always told that these kids are getting soft. I started this at 22. I'm now 30-something. Every year, these kids are getting soft. I don't think our kids are getting any softer. I do think there's some issues, but as parents, I know sometimes we get worried. If anything, I think there's a lot more good that's coming out. We're seeing more resilient kids, kids who are able to show up when mom and dad are completely absent versus when I first started. When I first started, they said these kids are soft, and I was like, I was your high school student 2 years ago. If they're soft, I'm soft. Like, I'm on their side.
What are you trying to say?
Anyway, so that's just a little,
I think really thinking about that being versus versus doing. We are so like results driven and achievement driven, right? Like we want that TV show when we want it. We want our pants to fit differently. We want to achieve some sort of a goal. And really with all of this, to me, it's like just learning to be in the experience of something just for the sake of doing it, right? Like you had such a passion for Krav Maga and you did it just for the sake of doing the thing versus achieving something. And so I think that's a really important piece of it, like learning how to just be in stillness, to sit with things and to not have to have an achievement or a goal is really important.
I really love that. I was listening to this podcast this week and they were talking about what if nobody is keeping score? Like, what if you're the only one keeping score about yourself? Like, you are trying to hold yourself up to this standard, but you're the only one keeping score. So, what if everybody was just playing just to play and there was no score? Then the joy ultimately comes because you're not feeling as though you're winning or losing. You're just doing it for the sake of.
I had I feel there's this effect in myself, and since I take myself to my job and I take to myself to my relationships and into my parenting and all of that, I noticed that all of the things you said, Kim, feel very true. But my ease with myself around people, like not being spooked by people or, walking down the street and someone being like, hey, smile today. I would have been like, go fuck yourself. Like, that's how I would. And I might still feel that inside, but I'm not spooked by that. I'm like, yeah, have a good day, man. Like, I'm not worried that they're going to come and take my bag or if they do, I'm on call. And I don't have to take it, so that's good. Sorry. So yeah, I feel like I have more ease when I'm walking somewhere. I have more ease when I'm sitting in a session with a family and some kid's about to throw a chair. Or I walk into a situation and I think somebody's going to start to throw a punch at somebody, and I'm like, all right, we're going to go out in this room, you're going to go in that room, and we're going to take 5. And I don't necessarily feel like my life's in danger. I mean, maybe that's foolish, but I have a lot of training to listen to, as soon as I feel like my life is in it's fucking go time. But I don't go, like I can go there and come back because I've trained to do it under really stressful situations. So I noticed like all those things are true. Like I feel more fit and like, my thoughts are better or my eating is better and all these things. But really like my sitting with people is better. And as a therapist, that's really important. Like I'm in training all the time about how to be present and how to be a therapist and how to train other therapists. But if I could tell them like, go do like Krav Maga for 6 months. Like that will help you because you will be pushed and again, I like to blame my instructor. You'll be pushed. And when you want to quit, you're not going to quit because it's life or death. Like you're not going to quit. So for me, that really helped me know this sucks right now. This moment sucks, but I'm not going to quit. I can't quit. Doesn't mean I don't need rest. I need rest too, but I'm going to keep fighting and I'm not going to quit. So I feel like that's rolled over into a lot of good in other ways in my life.
It definitely sounds like an example of like building resiliency, right? Like facing a challenge, meeting the challenge, knowing that you can stay calm and regulated and all of that. It sounds like, like that's a great practice to build that strength and resiliency.
We have the like growth is in discomfort. Like the first time I ever heard that was like painted on the wall in our Krav school. So, I don't like to be like chest to chest with a person that I'm not very familiar with and fight my way out of being like pinned on the, like that's not comfortable. And like what it does like physically and mentally as far as being prepared for things, I think has helped me just like be with people.
Thinking about like the lifestyle change and fitting things in. I love that you talked about your dad, but I think like having an understanding of yourself and recognizing it doesn't always have to be the same practice. While we are all super passionate about like yoga, Krav Maga, the gym training thing, like that doesn't have that for the general population. I don't know that that's the case. And so, maybe like building a list of things that are self-care practices that work. Like maybe sometimes it's a walk outside. Other times it might just be sitting on a park bench, time playing with a grandson. That's that's physically moving and active. So there are so many ways we can be in our bodies, and what we need day to day might be different based on where we are. Like if my system's really depleted, I don't need to do a heavy vinyasa flow, but there are days where I have a lot of that excess energy. There's times that I need to burn it off. So I think learning the practices, the physical movement practices that you love, but that you can choose something different based on how you're feeling. If it's a quiet interoceptive day, where you just want to be by yourself, like you take something that honors that. But meeting yourself where you are and knowing how to do that, I think, is a really important way to start to make it more of a day-to-day, kind of opening the box to include other things.
No, I like, and I think you alluded to it, and just this concept of self-compassion and creating like space and grace for yourself within the discomfort, or creating room to not show up should that be what happens next or what you need in that moment, having flexibility with it. I related very much to what you said, Mitch, because on my family crest, our motto is anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And so like, don't just do it, have it, put your whole ass into it. Like there's no reason to just limp along a little bit. So I am very guilty of, all right, I'm going to be healthier. And so I'm going to work out 8 times a week. And now I'm going to not eat. I'm going to start doing intermittent fasting, and I'm going to cut caffeine, and I'm going to drink A1 greens, and I'm going to do all this different shit. And then like at the end of it, it's like, wow, I hate my whole fucking life right now. I hate everything about it. I hate everything about it. I'm not happy. And my pants still don't fucking fit better because I've only done it for a day. And so like, that's just my vibe. And so for me, it's about staying in balance when I go that direction and being aware of myself and knowing my own pattern of engagement, that I am obsessive and perfectionistic, and I become obsessed with things. And that's why I have the perfect chicken carton, or I like raise chickens that look funny because that's what I'm going for, and become fixated on these weird aspy little things. And creating grace for the imperfection. Because where I find that I get out of balance is if I can't do it perfectly, then fuck it, I won't do it at all. And get stuck kind of in that all or nothing mindset. And so I'm actually, since your training that I went to back in January, it was cool because they gave us like yoga mats and blocks and blankets. It was really nice. I got all the swag when I left. And instead of throwing it in the trunk of my car to live there for the next 3 years, short term, I keep it in my office now. And when I know that I'm going into a really hard therapy session, when I know that and all my therapy sessions are hard. I work with folks that aren't doing great. When I know that I'm going to have a really hard meeting or a really hard personnel situation, I actually like pull out my mat and do some of those exercises for like 3 to 5 minutes. And sometimes I'm 3 to 5 minutes late to the hard thing, but I feel more grounded and centered and in my body. And I feel like the hard thing goes better when I pause and am very intentional about how I step into the hard thing versus like reactively just running from this thing to this thing to this thing to this thing, and don't ever pause to have those moments of being and just push my shoulders back or take a few deep breaths or whatever it is. And I don't know, I feel like we're so focused on being on time and keeping score and following all those pieces that sometimes wouldn't we be better off if we were a few minutes late but intentional about it?
And I want to tap into what you talked a little bit about, this idea of perfectionism, right? I think, and you mentioned about how if you don't want to do it, then you haven't found the right thing to do. And I think that there's this fear of taking risks and trying new things. And it's like, I know before I found yoga, I loathed working out. It was like, I do not run on a treadmill. I am not going outside. Like, I hate exercise. And then I found yoga and I'm like, oh, there it is, right? But the fear of stepping into a yoga studio for the first time is fucking real. And it's like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know, what if I'm not good at it? And people say all the time, I could never do yoga. I'm not flexible. I don't know how, and all of this stuff. And it's this fear of trying something for the first time because what if I'm not perfect? And I took just a little quick story. I took my son to this indoor obstacle course and he's like, time me. He goes, but I want you to time me 10 times. He's like, I want you to time me the first time, but I've never been through it before, so I have to learn my way around. And then I want you to time me again, because the second time will be better than the first, but like maybe I'll learn new things. And then he's like, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, I just want to practice. And then the 10th time, that's the time that like you can hold me to, right? And it's this idea that as kids, we're not afraid to jump in and do things for the first time. And then if we trip and fall, we try again and try again. And it's by the 10th time, you're good. But as adults, we're like, I'm not giving that a try for the first time, because what if I look silly? And what if I mess it up? And
No.
Like to be beginners at all.
but how many things are we missing out on by just like being afraid to try
Everything we
something
don't
for the
know.
first time? All the things, you don't know what you don't know.
And that beginner's mindset is so important. Like that's something we talk about often in yoga, right? Like thinking like you do the same poses pretty much every time, right? But if you experience it like it's the very first time, like all the different sensations that are unique to that moment, I mean, it's such an incredible way to be in your body like you were experiencing it for the first time, because we get so rote, in doing things. Yeah.
I don't love being in my body in the early years, right? Like it doesn't, 10 years ago, I was a yogi. I went every single day after work. And what I loved about the studio I went to then, you'd have stackable classes. So they had 30-minute classes for the first 3 hours. Like they had a 4 o'clock or like a 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30. And you could stack your classes so you could stay for as long as you wanted. But I could mind fuck myself into saying like, I'll only go for 30 minutes. And then usually once I got there,
Sure.
I would be there for like an hour and a half. But I could always say, at least it's only that 30-minute connection.
Right.
And then I loved being in my body. Like even when it got hard, it's still like I was never the worst. But now it's, well, if I show up, I could be the person that falls over in the first 10 minutes, or I could be the person who has to go into child's pose when I didn't want to, or I'm going to be the person that gets knocked the fuck out because I'm not paying attention. And I think there is that beginner's mindset that we don't want to go into it and suck out the gate and have witnesses to our sucking. Like we want to show up and especially in my role, like I'm the big boss in a lot of the rooms that I'm in. And so I can't afford to fuck up publicly, or if I do, I try to roll with it or make a joke out of it or whatever it is. But I don't like being incompetent anymore. And I used to have much more resiliency or self-compassion in that space. But as I've gotten older and the demands on, not my perfectionism, but my expectations on myself and other people's expectations on me, I have way less grace to be a beginner.
This isn't my phrase, but in our affiliate Fit to Fight program, this is theirs. They say everyone's fighting something. So it could be that you're fighting traffic, or your childcare is late, or you're fighting yourself, or you're fighting addiction, or you're fighting I look stupid. Like whatever you're fighting. Big F, little f. We all have these fights, and I forget which of you said like the showing up with whatever your fight is. When I step into my classes, which we stack classes, we have all kinds of different classes. If you don't like something, you can do something else. But there's this understanding that everybody's got a fight going on with them, and we don't have to talk about it, which is what I love so much about, because I live in a world where we talk about all the feelings we have. We don't talk about that shit there. We don't. We're all learning the same things. We're all fighting our own things, and there's kind of an appreciation for that. And I hate when they'll like take a picture after a workshop and we all look completely battered. And they're like, come on, a picture. And like people aren't smiling and your hair's like this and you're like, oh my God, can we take a picture before? But that's not the point. I mean, the point is that it's messy and it's hard and you're going to keep pushing. And like there is that space for rest. And that's not the space that's happening there. Like that's the space where like you're pushing through the things you're fighting, and you know that you're going to be okay, and you're going to be able to take these things out into your life, and you're not going to be as whatever the thing you were fighting is going to decrease a little bit because of what you trained in.
And maybe you're giving someone else permission to not be perfect.
Yeah.
Like by showing up as yourself, you're giving the person next to you permission to show up as themselves. And I think if you can embrace it in a way like, look at me fucking up so that person
that's
feels
right.
like they can fuck up
That's
too,
right.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, we do drills over and over, and if he's like, and, you know, my instructor's like, I don't care if you fuck it up, keep going. Like, don't stop. Like, keep going. So, I mean, that's great. That, like, when you said about introducing a person with, like, you didn't stop and go, hold on, I did it all wrong. Everybody noticed what I did. You just said the word again. Like, you said the name again, so nobody noticed. So you just keep going. Yeah.
I think self-reflection with it is so important, right? Like you notice your tendencies, right? We don't want to be the one in the room that isn't perfect, but like to be able to know that about yourself and then work with that, I think is such an important part, especially when we're thinking about the mental health realm and like, so why are we doing this physical activity? If it's to improve our mental health, noticing our thought patterns and our tendencies. Like I always say the yoga mat's like my petri dish. Like everything that comes up there is coming up in the real world, but my mat is a safe place to explore it and notice it and work with it. And so like knowing that that self-compassion is hard for you. You know what I mean? Like you're going to want to be the most perfect person in the room. Like that's a great thing to know about yourself. And how can you work with that and learn to sit with it? That your practice offers you a time to do that. So that's kind of cool. Uncomfortable, but growth is not always comfortable, right?
Discomfort. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm all for taking self-responsibility, but in this context of wanting to be perfect, or we keep talking about fear of failure. Correlation at best, but it's still a correlation. 75% of Americans are not meeting their daily recommended fitness levels, right? Obesity is on the rise, like sedentary lifestyle is on the rise. What else is on the rise? Fitness professionals. We have more fitness professionals now than we've ever had, and each year it continues to climb. And I believe that we are the ones getting in the way because everything that we say is fear-based because we want to sound smart. And so have you heard someone tell you that if you do an exercise wrong, you will get hurt? That's just not true, right? I love when people talk about injury prevention. If you can't predict it, you can't prevent it. And if there was such thing as injury prevention, we wouldn't have a bunch of really pissed off people watching the NFL every Sunday and saying, oh my gosh, that screwed up my fantasy football roster, right? So I do look at like from the professional standpoint, it's where we as professionals are getting in the way of these people who are already scared, who are already worried about, what it looks like to fitness, because fitness is very intimate. People don't like to have other people judging them. Now we stack on top of it, everyone's saying, oh, if you don't do it perfectly, you will get hurt. If you don't do it exactly this way, you're not going to get the results. That's just not true.
And you have to pay me.
And you have to pay
do it perfectly.
Right,
But
which
there's
is
this,
which
the
is
low
ludicrous.
rate of $9.99 per
Which is
month.
ludicrous. And so, yeah, if anyone listening, if you ever hear someone tell you injury prevention, walk away. It's not true. And it's going to make you feel a little bit better and less anxious to fitness for sure.
I'm so glad you said that because it just sparked in my brain that a big takeaway for me has been I'm not as afraid to get hurt. I mean, I'm like right now, like bruised all over. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, but like I'm a lot less afraid. And I think the holding back or being afraid to do something is going to cause me to injure myself instead of like, there's something I think mentally about like, I don't want to hurt and I don't want to be uncomfortable. Well, we are anyway, if we really sit with ourselves. So I think the takeaway of like, our bodies are very strong. And I do this when I do like women's classes and stuff. I'm like, your body's incredibly strong. Do you know that like your forehead could like knock a person out, or that like you could use your hands, your feet, your shins, your elbows, like your body's incredibly strong. And you have to do it to feel it. You can't just talk about how strong it is. So I appreciate that you said that, because holding back because you're afraid to get hurt, you're going to get hurt by sitting more than moving. Mm-hmm. At least that's how I feel at my cranky old age. Like, I'm like, oh, I got to move. Like, I can't sit anymore. This is hurting me more than moving.
Yeah, injury isn't if, it's when. You'll get hurt at some point. And those who participate in fitness that they love, it's not, okay, maybe we can reduce the likelihood, maybe. But more importantly, it's then when you do get hurt or injured or whatever it is, you are more resilient through it. Not just physically. I'm not just going to get through my injury faster, but I'm also just more mentally resilient, and I'm understanding. And hey, now I'm not blaming myself. And now not only am I hurt, I hate myself because I'm the one who got myself hurt. You can let go of all that, and it's going to make your life a heck of a lot easier for sure.
It's funny, as we're talking, so I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. Curb Your Enthusiasm as well.
Are you watching the last season?
Yes, of course. good. I hope it's not the last, because the last like 3 seasons have been the last.
Yeah.
But, so we'll see. We'll see what he does. But one of the things that I always liken my physical journey to is the episode where George Costanza discovers that his secret to success is to do the opposite of anything he feels like doing.
Yeah.
And
You said that when we got here, somebody was like, the saying yes when you want to say no.
yes, like the George Costanza.
I want to say no, so I'm going to say yes.
So I'm going to say yes, and that's and for me, that's the secret sauce, right? Like it's been a tough season, tough couple of weeks, and just yesterday, all I wanted to do was come home and like cuddle on the couch with a cup of tea or whiskey and do fuck all, right? Like that's what I wanted to do. Watch a movie, do whatever. And so often I find myself falling into those patterns even with my kids. Like the rule in the Ernest house is no screens from Monday to Friday, because we just find that it gets us out of balance and it's just not helpful. So we don't screen Monday through Friday, with the exception of Wednesday nights is movie night in the Ernest house, and we all watch a movie together, but no other screens, phones go away, all that kind of good stuff. And so I'm driving home yesterday, pissed off at the world because my babysitter's sick, right? And so everything has to shift. My husband's car broke down. It's like, all I want to do is just sit on the couch and do fuck all. But instead I say to my husband, who really needed a break that night, like, listen, I'm going to take the kids rock climbing. We're going to go climbing. You hang out at home. So I pile the kids in the car. We go rock climbing. Way better night than what I would have done had I followed my natural inclination, which was curl up on the couch and do nothing. But ultimately, the kids were happier. I was happier. My husband had that the quiet and the stillness that he craved, and it all worked out in the end. But how do we sort of propel ourselves into that saying yes when we should say no, or when our set point is I want to go home and hibernate and hide from the universe and do nothing, when what we probably really need to do is like move it out or feel through it. How do we cultivate that habit of George Costanza-ing the world when it comes to our own wellness? Because I imagine each of you have to do that from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
We've become obsessed with being healthy, and so the trend on the internet is how to live to 100. But if
Drinks Dr. Pepper every day.
Oh, thank you.
The centurion that she's like, the secret to life is Dr. Pepper.
well,
And
what's
cigarettes, she smokes too.
What's funny is so you look at those people who actually have lived to 100, they're always talking about how much fun they've had in life.
Yeah.
Versus you have these guys who are in their 40s and 50s, and it's like they have their entire life is dedicated to being healthy, and they're constantly getting blood work, and they're up at 4 a.m. to read a book on double speed and meditate and all this BS that you don't actually have to do, and chances are they're lying or going to die early anyway. But we've become so obsessed with living to 100. What happens when your mind goes at 80?
Yeah.
Like my dad has lived in such a way that if he dies today, like when he's laying there on his deathbed, he's gonna have no regrets. Like he lived every single day to enjoy the present, to enjoy that moment. And I think for a lot of us, just go do something that's fun. Go do stuff that's going to make your right now better. And I don't give a shit if it adds a few extra years to your life. If it's making you miserable now, it doesn't matter if you're stacking on years. Like you're just a miserable cuss for the next 40 years just to outlive everyone. Like we've looked at it from a wrong perspective. I want everyone to be healthy, but my goodness, mental health is a part of that, and you should really be finding things that you enjoy to do.
Especially because no one wants to be around you if you're a total crank.
Yeah, finding and connecting to joy is so important, and the fun and the lighthearted. Like if we're talking about physical fitness just from like a weight or appearance standpoint, like we're already setting ourselves up for failure, because we really should be doing the physical activities for our mental well-being so that we feel good, of course, in our bodies, but also in our mental landscape as well. And so that joy is so important, especially thinking about all the neurotransmitters. Oops, I have my microphone. And the way, how all that impacts if we're in that negative mindset and we are hyper-focused, right? Like all of those stress hormones are swirling and all of that. So it's just going to add to more of those challenges. Yeah.
I think there's a responsibility on us too, though, to know what it is that brings us joy. Like, I think it's really, I think there's a really, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but like, do I know myself well enough to know if someone sits down and says, what do you want to do right now? What would make you happy? What brings you joy? Like there's a personal responsibility to know how to answer that. And I don't know that is prevalent.
It's actually one of the questions in like the yoga therapy intake, what brings you joy? And the number of people that like just, don't have an answer to that and then cry like, oh my gosh, I don't have anything that brings me joy. Like it really is heartbreaking. Because for a lot of us, we don't have those things. Yeah.
That's the tagline for our podcast is searching for joy in all the wrong places.
Right.
Because so often our quest for happiness belies our experience of joy. Like we are so focused on, and that for my intakes, so often I'm like, what brings you into therapy? The answer is I want to be happy. It's like all the time. Like, are you?
Sorry, I'm
like,
already going to
really-
fail at helping you with that one.
That's going to be like a permanent like thing because that's not realistic. You're gonna I'm the worst therapist in the world. You're probably gonna experience like intense sadness and grief and loss and anger and frustration and all of those different things. And my job as your therapist is to actually help you experience all those things and still be all right at the end of the day. But so often I see people in their quest for joy leave their bodies either through like spending, gambling, porn, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. I mean, I've worked with clients over the years that have never had sex sober, ever.
Yeah.
Like your whole life, you've never connected with your partner in a physical way without substances involved. That's fucking crazy. Like, and if you can't be present in that moment, where else are you failing to be present in your life? And so I think that that's something that even in our leisure here in the United States, we're so into like booze culture or microdosing or, I mean, that's the new thing. I mean, now I get ads on my Instagram because I think I was talking to somebody about it, about people like it's a energy drink that includes cannabis so that while you're running, you can be high and you can also be high. And it's like, really? Do you, okay.
It's a really complicated like cocktail to make to just get going.
Feels like a lot.
Like, oh, I forgot my water.
Yeah. So I might as well drink weed. I don't know. Like, I don't. So how
Be
often are
pulling over to
we
eat.
not present for even our
Yeah.
joyful moments?
I think you bring up such an important point, though, because for so many people, it's not safe to be in your body. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel comfortable to notice what you're feeling and to be present. And that, especially in the yoga therapy space, is a really big part of what we do, is helping people learn how to be okay feeling physical sensation, right? Like, and that's very, very tricky. And so I think sometimes some of the barriers to physical exercise is that, like, don't feel safe or connected to my body in any way.
And that's where all our trauma is stored.
Yes.
And so, when I think, I mean, I can't not, be paranoid or think about like, well, if I don't fight here, like it's going to end in rape or death. Like I think about that. It's not fun to think about, but I'm like, okay, so I would like to know if this happens, like mechanically what I can do to get out of this. And so I think where my two passions, one of, being a therapist and, training in Krav Maga, I know that people are coming in with trauma, and I know it's not just women. I know, lots of people are coming in with trauma, and we are in one area of my life, we're there to talk about it and feel it and sit in it if that's what they choose. And in another area, we just know that everybody's fighting something, and we're not asking you about it. But if it happens, like we're doing a drill and somebody steps out and they take a few minutes and maybe they're crying or maybe they heard something or they felt something and it was really scary. And I think that working through that without necessarily talking about it or having people dig at it, but knowing it's safe, like everybody's fighting something, you work through that. And I think a lot of times there's healing that happens because now they're like, okay, what happened then's not happening now. What could I have done? Maybe like, can you show me, had I not like fallen into what could I have done there? And I think with some sensitivity, I think a lot of people can like, okay, I can kind of let that part go now a little bit. And I can think about now what I can do if I feel scared, or what I can do if I constantly see repeating in my brain or in my mind that experience. Well, now I can start playing like, yeah, I'd do this. And it does start to create new ways of thinking, new paths of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Do we all know who Sisyphus is?
Yeah.
The myth of, for those of you who don't know, pissed off a bunch of gods, doomed to hell, has to push a boulder up a mountain, and it falls back down. two lessons that I think we can learn from Sisyphus is number one is Sisyphus was not concerned with the pebble in his shoe. We've become so obsessed with the pebble in our shoe that we're missing the big rocks. Just go move. Just find ways you can be happy. But we're so focused on all these little things that is taking away from the big boulders. And it's this paralysis by analysis of, should I go do this? Should I do that? What do I do with my morning routine? What do I do at night? And it's like, holy shit, this big boulder's right in front of you. Just move it. The second thing is Sisyphus was happy. Like, we are so convinced, right? Like, if you picture Sisyphus is happy, this was his job, and he did it. And I think a lot of times, like, when we're so convinced that all of life is out to get us, right? That it doesn't matter what I do, I'm never going to succeed in my fitness journey, whatever. Maybe we take a step back and realize that, like, hey, a lot of this has to do with me and my outlook on it. And of course I'm failing because I told myself I was going to fail. And we don't want to fail so badly that now I'm 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years behind when if I would have just, I mean, everyone talks about getting sober. It's like, yeah, the best time for me to get sober was probably 16 years ago, but the second best time was 3 years ago. And I could be super pissed off at all the terrible things I did over those 16 years. But I can also be really happy that 3 years ago I decided to get sober. So are we spending too much time looking at the negatives and not enough time taking a step back and saying, holy shit, my life's actually pretty good?
But I mean, what you're describing is that like intentionality about looking at the parts of your life that are pretty good. And I think so often we fail to do that. And I think it's human nature in a lot of ways too. Like,
It's our nervous system. We aren't in control of that, to
we're-
be honest, right?
we're
Like it's
made,
programmed,
yes.
it's set.
We're programmed
Yes.
to attend to what's broken, but with intentionality, we can turn our eyes towards the light. And like with intentionality, we can say like, yeah, yes, but I won't allow that to hijack the rest of my day. And I don't know, I think we get stuck in these patterns where I'll be happy when this happens or when that happens or when X comes to fruition. And then we get there and it turns out that what we predicted we would feel is not necessarily what we always feel. And the inverse is also true. A great book, it's called Stumbling on Happiness by a guy named Dan Gilbert. If you've never read it, highly recommend. But it's all about how terrible we are at forecasting. It's affective forecasting. How terrible we are at predicting how we're going to feel in certain contexts. And so often, he says one of his questions that he asks people at dinner parties is, how would you be if your firstborn child dies? And it's like, that's a terrible dinner party conversation. But what he says is so often, we predict our entire lives falling apart. And he said, and that would happen. And there would be joy. There would still be joy despite the immense, tremendous, forever empty that you would feel in that horrible scenario. And you would go on vacation with the rest of your family. You would wake up with your spouse on Christmas morning and hug them. You would have moments of joy with your parent or your dog or your chickens, whatever it is, that there would be these pockets of joy despite that tremendous unrelenting sadness. And the inverse is also true, that when we have really wonderful, beautiful, amazing moments, there will also be pockets of sadness throughout. And to be able to be present in both of those things, or even allowing both of those things to exist simultaneously, is where like the key to happiness really is. But so often we lose sight of that because we think, I need all these different pieces to be in place and then I'll be happy. And it's like, no, be happy now and allow those pieces to come or not come, because it's really not that deep.
Yeah, again, it just comes back to being present, aware in the moment, noticing your experience and not wanting it to be a certain way. Because as soon as you're wanting it to be something else, you're not even there. You're gone. You're somewhere
forever
else.
seeking. You spend your whole life seeking something that's unattainable.
So one of the things we do here on the pod, real quick before I jump to that. So I did pull out 3 specific studies today because physical movement really is one of the best things we can do for our mental health. So here at the pod, we explore all the different things we can do or not do and how that contributes to our happiness or unhappiness. But sort of time and time again, so I have one meta-analysis by Nets published in 2017 where they reviewed just about every study they could find looking at exercise and other treatments for antidepressant, including antidepressants. And pretty much all of the reviews they found discovered that physical movement in conjunction with psychotherapy or antidepressants improves outcomes time and time again. They also found this one particular study that running therapy, and they actually looked at walking therapy as well, outperformed antidepressants when it comes to overall outcomes. With the larger the group you're running with, so that social piece you identified, the larger your community in your physical movement, the better your gains of your physical movement. So they really looked at that that specific interrelationship between community and physicality. And then last but not least, Notel published most recently in 2024, Notel et al., that exercise is an effective treatment for depression, with walking, jogging, yoga, or strength training being more effective than any other type of physical movement, particularly when intense. So it's this idea of just getting that heart rate up, and how if you can get that heart rate up in different contexts, how that helps both baseline depression and baseline anxiety, but only when the person isn't focused on specific outcomes. But only when the person isn't specifically trying to chase a certain time, a certain physique, a certain physical look, when it's really for exercising for the sake of exercising and being in that moment. So I thought that that was a really cool study, and one of the most recent studies. One of the things that they said can mitigate expectancy effects is future studies should aim at blind participants. And I don't really know how we do that, right? How do we, you're not walking, you're like, what are you doing here? So I don't know how they will achieve that, but I think it's cool that they identified that as a mitigating factor here. So one of the things we do here on the pod is we accept questions. And so if you have any questions, Kim at howtobehappyhour.com, that's how you get them to us. We have a couple upcoming pods that I think will be pretty cool. So we have one coming up on creativity and mental health, and how we can engage in different creative outlets and how that impacts our mental health. We have one looking at social media and our mental health, so that's our next one after that. And last but not least, one of our upcoming pods is advocacy, and how do we use our role and our voice to improve our own mental health outcomes. So those three will be coming up. If you have any questions on that, again, that's Kim at howtobehappyhour.com. But one of the questions we had submitted for today that I thought was kind of cool, and so I'll throw it out to y'all. In the age of technology, how do innovations like virtual reality, mobile apps, and wearables promote mental health gains through physical movement?
They're making us worse. My wearable is not an indicator of where I'm at. And unfortunately, there are way too many people now who are relying on the data to tell them when to move. And we are robust meat wagons hurling through space on a rock. Don't overcomplicate it. And so yesterday, my wearable told me that I had terrible recovery, right? My HRV was lower and my resting heart rate was higher. I went out and I PR'd my deadlift and I PR'd my half marathon in the same day. If I would have listened to my damn wearable, I would have done nothing that day. And so I do think that we're trying to push technology a little too far, and now humans are way too reliant. Now, it makes me as a coach more accessible to a lot of people. I have clients all over the nation, which is great. But I think if we're looking at this from a positive and negative, I think technology is making us fitness a whole lot more negative.
I would agree with that. I'm not a huge tech fan, so I totally agree there. One benefit I've seen is in the heart rate variability. So I had a client at one point who with complex PTSD, a heart rate variability, always really poor. Yet during a session, she was looking back and she found that her heart rate variability improved for 1 hour that week, and she went back to see what it was, and it was during a session where we did movement and meditation. So because people love evidence, I think that's a great tool if you want to actually see things working. Look, when you did this notice it improved, I think that, it can be a benefit in that way, but I'm with you 100%.
And I think like looking at it long term, like if you have a wearable, what's going on over the last 6 months? But we want to see that instant data for one day, and that's not what a wearable is supposed to be used for.
Right.
And when it breaks and your whole life completely falls apart and now you need mental health help
Right.
and you can't get out of bed, that just doesn't seem, that's too big.
And it pulls you outside of yourself. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of this fitness, no matter how you're doing it, it's to return to yourself.
Yeah.
And that wearable is something external that you're looking to, like anything else.
Like, how do
So-
you feel?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Wait, how do you actually?
Like, I know that your watch is telling you this, but how do you?
What are you actually experiencing right now? Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm also not a big social media person. I understand, some benefits of needing to track what my kids are doing, but I just spy on them and I eavesdrop and I have bad boundaries and I burst in their room and I'm like, hey man, what you doing? I'm going to just sit here and hang out with you, okay? And he's like, get out, please. I'm like, no, I'm going to hang out for a little, like, I'm just going to bust in and that's how I do it. But, I think that's what the appeal to me was in, like just the kind of training that I enjoy. It's, it really doesn't, I don't really have a way to track it. I could maybe attach my watch to my ankle or something. Like my wrist isn't going to quite calculate what all is happening. And so it's really based on like, this was really scary. This was really overwhelming. I fought my way out of it. Like, look at it. Like, we're all exhausted and we're all like, fist pumping out of class. And, this was something new I did. And we're talking about what that experience was a little bit. And I think that's enough. Like, that's enough to carry us to like, what are we going to train the next time?
I think a positive. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
We have a software registration app for the studio, and it's more like a social media tool also. But when you sign up for a class, it'll tell you then when your friends sign up for classes too, and you'll see kind of this snowball effect. Like someone will sign up, and then this person signs up, and then this person's, and then all of a sudden you have all these people that are coming together just because they know that someone else is coming. And I think, I too am not a fan of the technology off of your watch and into your life is what my one teacher always says. But I think from an accountability piece, it can be useful to gain that cohort to be in a community with, to do the physical stuff.
Yeah, I don't have anything positive to say. So I don't know. I mean, we have like a VR at home, and I tried to buy into like the VR physical movement thing, and it was fun. Like I enjoyed it, and I moved. And for me, it's like sunshine on my face, fresh air. Like I think I'm a plant, and that I just need enough water and sun, and I'll probably be okay. So I don't have a lot of super positive. I guess the one positive thing I could probably mention that I've noticed is, especially when it comes to my own like healthy eating, I am one that when I'm really stressed out, I reach for those quick dopamine fixes. So things like spending money I don't need to spend, or junk food, or caffeine. I mean, that's one I don't know that I'll ever be able to give up. But like those sorts of things for me, I think when I am tracking what I'm eating, I am much less likely to be unintentional with how I eat, or just like grabbing snacks as I walk through the kitchen or finishing the kids' chicken fingers. I'm less likely to do that because I don't want to have to put it in my app. And so I think in that instance, it allows me to be a little bit more intentional, and it slows me down enough to not be as reactive. But when it comes to some of the other pieces, I can't say that I have noticed tremendous benefits other than maybe in monitoring my own heart rate, in my more intentionally, like that neurofeedback piece. If I'm trying to really intentionally lower my heart rate, it's helpful in those instances. But then big picture, does that matter, or is that helpful at all? I don't know. So how do y'all think physical movement could be effectively integrated into mental health treatment?
I've been pushing for that for a long time. I want to train especially our staff that go into homes who don't know what to do when their heart is pounding and it's scary, and they're like, I'm supposed to be here to help this? Like, I don't fucking know what to do.
I want to cry.
I don't know what to do. Deb, what do I do? I'm like, it's not a crisis. Let's start there. It's gonna be okay. I think that to be helpful, we have to practice it ourselves, and so I think, just when we start meetings with some silence and like everybody get in your body and everybody like, let's land here, put your computer away, like let's take. I'll ask for 90 seconds, and people are like, oh shit, we gotta sit for 90 seconds. I'm like, mm-hmm. Let's do it. So I think really there are really tiny little practices. Even though I want to see my staff get up and like hit pads and learn how to get out of chokes and do all kinds of fun stuff that I think would actually give them a good boost to confidence as far as like I'm not in danger. I think that would be helpful, but integrating just more, let's be present and let's get out of our heads and off our devices for a little bit, and we can do some stretching, and we can do things that now we're in our body, and now we can like talk to each other, or we can really find out what would be helpful to you in this family that you're working with. Or I don't think it has to be big, and I don't think we need a lot of equipment, and I don't think we need more things. I think we probably need less.
I think integration, speaking from my perspective, so I work with a counseling practice and also with a functional medicine practice, with the understanding that like we all aren't experts in everything. And so if I can take that piece, like self-regulation is a big thing that I work with people. And, so having, the people in place that can help, bring that to patients, clients, the practitioners. That's why I love that you guys do, so much of that self-care training and workshops. But, bringing it in and integrating so that people have, the therapist to talk things out, top down regulation. You've got your yoga-based practices, which are bottom up. Of course, those can be other exercise modalities, but, recognizing that bringing that piece in and helping to teach people how to do that, not just the practitioners, but the clients and patients themselves, I think is key, that whole body, whole person approach.
I've discovered just physical movement in the work that I do as being super beneficial and helpful. And it's interesting, even I didn't realize it until this question was submitted, how far my therapeutic practice has drifted from that. But like I started out in inpatient facilities and hospitals and prisons. And so that was where I started really, like I cut my therapeutic teeth, so to speak. And I remember working with a population, an alternative to prison substance use facility. A lot of these gentlemen were really closed off. A lot of these guys had like buku intergenerational patterns of trauma and years and years and years suffering like from the disease of addiction and just this inability to ever be in their own body. And so therapy was really challenging for them, and especially therapy where they sat down across from like a woman in a room and had to just sit and talk about their feelings was like horrifying to a lot of these guys. And so what I pretty quickly discovered is that if I were to say like, hey, do you guys want to have our session outside today? And like just go, because we were right across from a park. Do you want to have our session outside today? And just go walk through the park as we're talking. Like, yes, we had issues about confidentiality, and there were times where our voices would have to get quieter. We'd have to go a different way, or we would also like play basketball. And obviously, like they were way better at basketball than I was, all of them, every single one. But to say like, hey, do you just want to go shoot some hoops and like talk as we're doing it? And that was so much less intimidating and so much less threatening. And even now, where Zoom has kind of taken over everything, like where we used to do phone calls, but now we do Zoom. There are times where I'll say to one of my supervisees, like, hey, do you want to switch to the phone? And even though we're an hour apart, you can put in your AirPods and I'll put in mine, and let's each walk in a park and talk. Those to me are so much more fruitful experiences. And yet I realize even when I receive this question, like, man, my practice has really drifted from that, because I do a lot of telehealth now. And so I do therapy through a computer, and that's cool, but and creates a lot of accessibility, and there's a lot of benefits to it for sure. But I can't say, hey, do you guys just want to go for a walk as we have our session? Like, that's not an option anymore. And that's really changed a lot of different things. And we now regulations that disallow it. Like the four walls law means that either myself or my clients need to be in the facility in order to be able to bill insurance, which is bullshit and stupid. And someone with power should change that. But it's reality. It's currently one of the challenges that we're facing. So I don't know. I think it's well intentioned, but it really impedes our effectiveness overall.
I'm on the outside looking in here, but I think twofold. Number one, the continuum of care is just absolutely horseshit, mainly from my side. So personal trainers, strength coaches, because we don't like to share, and we have to remember that exercise is very intimate. And so if someone comes to me, I'm not just their personal trainer. I now apparently know everything in existence, and so I kind of that power goes to my head, and now they get hurt, whether mentally or physically. I do not want to share them. I do not want to send them to a physical therapist or a counselor. So I think number one, we just need better personal trainers and other people kind of in my position. And then number two, that being able to collaborate, like on my end, it takes a weekend of your time and like $500 and now you're a personal trainer. So you guys have all the red tape. I have no red tape. And so we have a bunch of people who just really don't care. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. They're doing it because I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And so I see that a lot, whether, any of the professions that actually require degrees and certifications and other like red tape, so to speak. It seems like on that end, there's a whole lot more willingness to share. But like I look at people like me, we're like that first line of defense. Generally speaking, when someone's hurting, they come to a personal trainer first, right? And then it's like, oh shit, like maybe I need a nutritionist or a physical therapist or a clinical psychologist to help, right? And so, I do think that people like me are screwing it up big time. So I'll apologize for all of us.
I do struggle that sometimes people say, no, running is my therapy. It's like, no, therapy's your fucking therapy.
Yeah.
Running can benefit you. There's a lot of values in it.
therapy.
But with it, like that does it, there's still like things to unpack there. And I think we see a lot of folks that are extremely like physical specimens, like David Goggins. Like I loved it. Stay hard. Like he's great. And there are moments where I'm like, I bet it's really hard to love you, sir. Like I bet, and he'll talk about like he talks about like his failed marriage and all those different challenges. And it's like, you still might want to look at it a little differently, perhaps. I don't know.
I think
David,
I think
I'd be
it's
happy
three.
to see you private pay.
3 failed marriages, I think.
Is it 3?
It's 3 now, I think.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
But running is his therapy.
But running is his therapy, and I agree that it's really beneficial. And there probably are some other people. And working in the addictions world, I worked with a lot of folks that are like, I will lift my way out of the disease of addiction. And I'm like, I bet you could. Maybe, but then you're white knuckling it, and you need other pieces and parts of that. You need to shift other parts of your thinking and your nervous system and your connection and your relationships and have that more holistic approach. So, yeah, I think that but I disagree with you. I think my field is just as like territorial and I mean.
So we're all horrendous.
Yeah, we're all
horrendous.
None of us
Cool.
play
The last one
well
of
with
us.
others. It sounds like you guys have a great thing going in your practice. I would love to study like your organizational leadership and how they figured that out. But I noticed that even in my field, where the prescriber and the therapist don't see eye to eye, or the family therapist and the individual therapist don't see eye to eye, or the couple, and it's like, y'all, let's work towards the same goal, and we might have some slightly better outcomes.
Yeah.
I actually think that we only improve those attachment wounds through relationships. So as much as I love what I do, I get to go do it by myself. I probably, after, I've trained really hard and I'm feeling like tired, but in a good way, I probably don't have a lot of energy to like pick shitty fights with my family, which is good. Mom worked really hard. She's not gonna be mad that the kitchen's a mess. That's good. Like that does help relationships. But if I, the therapy part, and it doesn't necessarily mean always sitting in front of somebody talking back and forth, but I do think looking at it's through the relationships that we heal the parts of us that need to be seen by someone else or are afraid to do that. And so I think the movement and exercise are all really important components to it, and the therapy part doesn't necessarily happen by yourself or without intentional exploring. Like, what are the relationship wounds that I have, which I might not get like training with other people or running with other people. I still need a place to process. This is getting better, like I'm able to be with this group of people now and be vulnerable with them or talk about things with them on the same page. Like, where are you processing that that's getting better? Where's that self-reflection happening? And that's the biased therapist in me. Yeah.
I think that's an important point too, though, and the way that the movement can be used to learn and feel and sense your body. So interoception is a big thing in yoga, learning how to feel physical body sensation. So like knowing that it's there, being able to accurately interpret it, and then based on what you feel and notice, choosing, some sort of self-regulatory tool. And so, and obviously then, that benefits therapy. You know what I mean? When your patient can actually feel what's coming up and know that this emotion is anger, frustration, abandonment, whatever it is, they can actually interpret that because they're safe enough to feel it, and accurately interpret it. That's really important for then that, piece of things, I think. So
I think the last question that I found particularly interesting, and so I'm curious about everybody's perspective here, is that was submitted. Can you elaborate on the neurobiological mechanisms that underlie the positive impact of physical movement on mental health? How do things like neurotransmitters, neuroplasticity, and brain structure play a role?
That's such a big, fabulous, amazing question.
I know. I was like, man, you asking the hard stuff.
The piece that I could add is, and I think we talked about this just yesterday a little bit, that I'll use the same analogy that like if I'm riding the superhighway and I'm on autopilot all the time, that's what I'm going to think, that's what I'm going to do, and it may be what I'm going to feel, but it's going to take that discomfort of like trailblazing and going a different way, choosing to go a different way, and that's going to take some time. And with the notion of neuroplasticity, if I can correlate a new emotional experience, let's say with exercise, if it's been something I've like dreaded, and I have all this anticipatory dread about like, oh fuck, like what a miserable, like I have to go do this. That's what I'm going to think and feel when I'm getting ready to go train, as opposed to, really creating an emotional experience. Like I worked really hard. This was incredible. This was hard, and I really pushed through it. And people were there to support me and like cheered me on and were like, damn, that was, good for you. Now I have an emotional experience, and slowly I'm not taking that super highway path anymore. I'm creating a new path. It is a little slower. It takes a little more time. I have to be aware of it. But over time I can choose now, like I can do this. I do know what the outcome will be. And that emotional part of it is what motivates me to do it. I don't know about all the other stuff, neurotransmitters and that shit. I don't know.
I'll take neurotransmitters.
There you go.
So when we think about, regulating our nervous system, we can do it top down, right? Prefrontal cortex, that way of regulating. But the body communicates to the mind and the nervous system as well. And so, so holding a particular shape, so for example, a forward fold actually does have a calming and grounding effect on your nervous system. So you can reduce, levels of cortisol and adrenaline. If I'm really spiked and anxious, I can do a forward fold, and that shape is going to communicate to my nervous system safety, calm, everything is okay. So you can reduce some of those levels. And so the ability for us to use our bodies, whether it's movement or breath, to affect what's happening, with neurotransmitters and with our nervous system is I could nerd out all day about it. It's so freaking cool. But yeah, and then just if I'm feeling really down, if I'm depressed, doing something that opens my heart, will actually, uptick things. And so we can, regulate and shift what's happening, in the brain that way.
No, I think the concept of neuroplasticity is one that's always been really curious to me, because I think we have such a finite approach to all sorts of different things. I think you mentioned like fear of injury and all those different pieces kind of holding us back. I think the neuroplasticity and some of those concepts can really just be a broader microcosm for our own resiliency in the work that we do. And really, what's always been curious to me is how our minds can impact our own perceived competence or effectiveness or ability to engage in different things. And I think I don't know, something that I guess my drug of choice is doing things I don't think that I can do. There's something to me that's such a unique type of high that you can experience when you either overcome something or you're sitting in a space thinking like, there's no fucking way I'm going to do it, but I'm going to try, and then you do it, and there's just that moment of like, wow, like when you surprise yourself kind of in that moment, you're like, wow, I was just giving it a shot, but here we are. And so I think it's that concept of yet. And I think there's a lot of power in the term yet. There's a lot of ability to be more motivated and connected to yourself when it's, I can't do that yet, or I'm not there yet. And then realizing the more intentional you are about taking those minor steps towards your goal, how much you can really change both the way your brain functions and thinks about things, but also the way your body moves and what you're really capable of. And I think so often, like I'm looking down the barrel of 40 right now, and that's been a unique experience for me because like I had babies and that season of life is very different. And so now I'm coming into like that childhood phase of motherhood, which is very different than the baby toddler phase of motherhood. They're a little bit more independent. I'm finding that I have more flexibility and autonomy in what I do. And so, but I'm also turning 40. And so it's like, so do I like do new things? I don't know that I do new things or whatever. But last year, my husband and I I decided and my husband went along for the ride, I guess, that we were going to run a half marathon. And we trained for it some, but then life happened and do we cancel? Do we do it? And we both just decided like, fuck it. We'll show up, we'll run for as long as we can run. And if we don't finish, the ladies with the balloons will sweep us up in the golf carts. And that's how the story goes. And so we did it and we showed up and we finished. And I think we were both like just shocked by the experience because I don't think either of us saw that coming. And it was a really good reminder of how our brains and our minds control our outcomes by our expectations about being unable to do something. And so that's where that neuroplasticity comes into play for me, is that our minds aren't always on our side in what we're doing. And sometimes it's turning around and telling our minds like, hey, shut up, I'm going to do it. And you've got to be quiet right now. And we just see where it leads us. Mm-hmm. So anything left unsaid as we wind down here today? Thank you all for
Thanks.
bringing your experience and background.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This was the How to Be Happy Hour. Again, I'm Dr. Kim Ernest, licensed psychologist and licensed professional counselor at Pennsylvania Counseling Services, and our newest venture, Live Up Counseling, here at PA Counseling. We have a few upcoming pods, so any questions, please submit to Kim at How to Be Happy Hour. Topics about creativity, social media, and advocacy, and how that plays a role in our mental wellness. Thank you.